Hey, welcome back to the channel and episode 5 of our read-along book club of Donald Ray Pollock's Knockemstiff, a book that, yes, you guessed it, I am continually enjoying and appreciating the diversity I'm finding here, the nuance. I think on the surface you could say that this is an examination of characters who are very much the same, who are very tragic, who are very ugly on the inside and the outside many times. But I think if you read a little more carefully, you'll see some interesting stuff here that Donald Ray Pollock is trying to tell us through his characters. But don't forget, we have a Discord, we have a channel specifically for this read along. So if you'd like to discuss in more detail with me along with all of the other folks, check out the link in the description. All right, let us move right into the writing, and we will start with Rainy Sunday. Now, the interesting thing about this story is we know these two women. We know Sharon and Joan. We didn't know them by name until now, but they, in fact, appeared in the episode Back Teen, or the story Back Teen, with our nameless character, but also another one who is named Jimmy, who we also meet in this story. But let us start with the first line, because I'm always, again, in love with Donald Ray Pollock's first line. So it was 1 o'clock in the morning on a rainy Sunday, and Sharon was sitting at the kitchen table debating whether or not to stuff another slice of American cheese into her mouth when Aunt Joan called, begging her niece to ride into town. The one thing I like about this is there's a sense of anticipation here, right? We don't know what she's wanting. So the first line we get from Joan is, "Would you mind we try one more time?" And we don't really understand what that is until a few pages in, I believe, because I made a note here too. When Sharon sighed, she had told her aunt the last time she wasn't doing it anymore. Not only was it dangerous, it made her feel dirty. And so again, this is just piques our curiosity, our interest, like what is going on here? And we also know something else. Her husband, Dean, has been in an accident. Well, we don't quite know that yet, but we do know he's a little off his rocker. And so here you can see Dean had the TV turned up full blast in the living room, listening to some big mouth preacher with frizzy blonde hair stuck up around his head like a halo. And no matter where Sharon went in the cramped house, she couldn't escape the sounds of televised religion. But that isn't really telling us why he's crazy just yet. He does some pretty zany stuff. And we understand what happened to him. He has this plate in the back of his head after a very bad car accident, and he has a skin flap over it, which he aggravates a little bit, let's say. And I love this. So this is almost a sense of coping for Sharon, because she's contemplating eating this piece of cheese, and then her aunt calls and she thinks about this for some time. She's contemplating it, and this is the moment where she decides. So she hung up the phone and peeled the plastic wrap off one more slice of the waxy cheese. I'm sure anybody you've heard of emotional eating, and I can only imagine that's exactly what this is, because it really just symbolizes herself and her distress in the situation for doing this activity for her aunt, yet we still don't know what it is. And this next highlight is exactly when we find out. In the last year, she had picked up 5 men for her aunt, but according to the older woman, not one of them had even stuck around for a sausage and gravy breakfast the next morning. And I highlighted this next part because, again, I'm just, as a writer, always interested in learning more. And Donald Ray Pollock uses very interesting things here and there in his writing, such as this. So tired sheets on her fat body. So it's almost, it's personifying these sheets. And rather than saying sagging sheets or draping sheets, he uses tired sheets. And we can all picture exactly what that looks like. And again, we go on further to describe her Aunt Joan. Her gray hair was piled on top of her head in a knot the size of a softball, and she never had tasted lipstick in her life. So again, you could say had never wore lipstick, have never put on lipstick, but had never tasted lipstick is just so much more evocative than the alternative. And this is when we find out that Dean is basically apeshit crazy, or we're kind of questioning his sanity anyway at this point. Just as she was finishing her eyes, Sharon heard Dean yell something about a giant turtle and run out the back door. That really caught me off guard when I read that. I wasn't sure if it was just more Donald Ray Pollock Knockemstiff color, or if it was something deeper. And we do know that it is something deeper and more significant when her aunt asks what's going on. And we know the rains got him all screwed up. And that's sort of a catalyst for him apparently in this story. No doctor knows why, but for some reason, anytime it rains, Dean goes apeshit and does all kinds of strange stuff. We learned a little bit about Sharon's mother, and that even though she was called Cave Woman in her youth, her Aunt Joan said she was pretty, just like Sharon. And we learn of a tragic fate of her mother when she got a call and her mother's body had been found in a dumpster behind a pancake house. And even now, 10 years later, Aunt Joan still called up the police department down there to see if they made an arrest yet. And I highlighted this next part because we bring up Shady Glen again. And so we find out that there is a little creek called Shady Glen, but according to the Wikipedia entry of Knockemstiff, we know that the entire town is sometimes called Shady Glen. And now we find out what happened to poor Dean. He got in a car accident. It appears he was at a bachelor party, possibly, most likely cheating on his wife, because he flew through the windshield at something like 80 miles an hour and managed to survive somehow. So 8 months later, he walked out of the rehab center on crutches. A thin layer of skin they'd peeled off his ass covered the steel plate in the back of his head. And Sharon still thought about the panties occasionally, tried to picture the girl who wore a size 5. She hadn't worn underwear that small since she was in the 3rd grade. Again, this is just a great internal thought that is revealing the character of Sharon here, that she's, she's overweight, she's self-conscious, even though her aunt is the one considers her beautiful because she's going to pick up these guys for her. And this is the moment, this next highlight is when I discovered that these are the back teen girls. These are the 2 women that Jimmy and our protagonist found way back in the back teen story, because besides the cross-eyed waitress, there was only one other person in the Krispy Kreme, a wasted-looking young man in a booth near the back who seemed to be talking to himself, and this man is Jimmy. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be the other guy, the nameless guy, and I kind of was hoping it was, but we do see here that he was with some guy, had a split lip looking mouth, so we know that he's talking about the other fellow, and he gives them a big smile which does not have chipped teeth. So we do know that it is Jimmy before we even know that he's named. He told them his name was Jimmy as he eagerly slid into the booth next to Sharon. His greasy hair hung down in his eyes and patchy beard covered his skinny neck. Donald Ray Pollock, he continues to have just such an amazing talent for describing very disgusting people. I feel like the 3rd story that I'm going to talk about in this video really demonstrates that ability, but I don't feel like any of these stories lack that quality whatsoever. And so Jimmy, he just really gets into it. He starts licking her ear, or sticking his tongue in her ear, in Sharon's ear. But then they go out into the parking lot and Jimmy pulls out a plastic bag and a spray can from his coat pocket. And we know what he's doing because he says, "Party time," he said again, nudging Sharon with his elbow. And then she watches him fill the bag with spray and then stick his face in it and inhale deeply several times. And then Joan coerces this man to drink some alcohol that has been drugged, and he passes out pretty much. His eyes are open, which is kind of a creepy visage that Sharon has to look at here. And then Joan's asking her, "Why don't you just burn him with a lighter, make sure he's not dead?" "Well, his freaking eyes are open," Sharon said. "Is he doing anything else? Is he moving?" "No, but his goddamn eyes are awake." Aunt Joan was silent for a moment. "Burn him with your Zippo a little." "Are you nuts?" "Oh, don't set him on fire. Just see if he flinches at all." And here we get more, when she goes home, she gets more craziness from Dean. So 10 minutes later, she stopped the car in front of Sharon's house. They could both see Dean pacing back and forth in the front room, jabbing his hands into the air. All the lights were on. It looked like 100 people lived there. Pieces of the TV antenna were scattered in the muddy driveway. "Where's your curtains?" Aunt Joan asked. "I have no freaking idea," Sharon said numbly. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, and Dean had been at it since yesterday afternoon when the rain started. He'd been to doctors all over Ohio, but nobody could explain why the rain made him so crazy. And Sharon leaves her Aunt Joan along with Jimmy to do what they're going to do, and maybe he will stick around for that gravy breakfast that she promised, or all the other guys didn't stay around for anyway. But there's some interesting stuff in here that really, I think, really expands the story into something special. We have a moment here when Sharon gave up and went around shutting off all the lights, and a photograph of her and Dean lay on the floor in the kitchen, the frame broken, and she kicked it under the table. And so actions like that really just speak so much to the character's headspace. And, we know that obviously the crack in the glass is representing their sort of destroyed marriage or relationship. And then she kicks it under the table, meaning she is sort of done with it. She's over with it. She's over it. She doesn't feel like there's any hope. And she's at least mentally abandoning this relationship, because then she walked down the hallway and unlocked her bedroom door with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. Pulling off her sweats, she crawled into bed with a box of donuts, pulled the blankets up over her. Yes, she thought, she was definitely catching a cold. And so again, more of this emotional eating, more of this coping, full circle. We start with a slice of cheese, we end with these donuts. And this to me just really speaks to Pollock's ability to maintain the character. These aren't just random details. These aren't just colorful details. They are colorful, but they really speak to character, because that's exactly what's happening here. She starts with the opening line even about her contemplating eating this piece of cheese, and then at the end of the night, after she's done this terrible stuff or been forced to do these terrible things, hides away, locks herself in her bedroom with a box of donuts. And I like here, Donald Ray Pollock also uses, every time she bites into a donut, something else happens. She bit into it, a chocolate cream filled. Raindrops splattered against the window. She ate the donut and wondered what it would be like to live in the desert. Everything there would be new, because we know that the doctor thought that maybe if they moved to the desert, where it's going to rain a lot less, if at all, maybe that would affect Dean's health. But then she bites into a glaze and she started to think about Jimmy. He'd stuck his tongue in her ear the first time anyone had ever done that. His breath was bad, but so was Dean's. She wished now that she'd asked him when they were in the backseat together if he'd ever been to Arizona. And so what I love about this part, again, is that she first saw him as disgusting. This guy Jimmy had her hands in her pants, his tongue in her ear, and she was utterly disgusted by this guy, wanted to get out of the car, didn't want anything to do with this whatsoever. But now that she's come back to her life, she's seen her husband, her house is in disarray, her relationship is in disarray, she's locking herself in a room, eating these donuts. She's thinking, well, maybe Jimmy is better, right? Because Dean has terrible breath too, and maybe this is a chance for her to be truly happy for once. And it goes on here. She wondered if he had a girlfriend, maybe even a wife. She hadn't noticed a wedding ring, but that didn't mean anything these days. Then she remembered Aunt Joan and decided that she better not think about Jimmy anymore. So great stuff here. I love the character work here. This the depth that we get in these very short stories, particularly this one. And finally, Sharon licks the sugary coating off her fingers and picked up a blueberry, one of her favorites. Through the door, she heard Dean moving around again. Then the DJ came on and said something about more precipitation. She reached over and turned the radio up a little. The rain had settled. The man said in his late-night voice over the Ohio Valley, it was going to stick around a while. And we know what that means. That means Dean is going to be apeshit. It speaks even more to the fact that her life sucks. She hates it. She's trapped. Even the forecast, the weather itself is working against her. So what I really liked about this one is we have a woman, a tragic woman, helping out her aunt to do these, to get laid essentially. And then what's sad about this whole thing is that she seems like a nice person. I mean, her mother died a terrible death. Nobody knows why. Found in a dumpster. And she goes home back to her crazy husband, locked herself in a room, and is just eating these donuts, sort of finding the silver lining of this shitty situation with Jimmy, I guess, and kind of almost in a way fantasizing about running away with him and to Arizona perhaps. But a great story. I feel like these are all great in their own ways, but let us move on to the next one, Holler. We have heard of what the Holler is quite often. Characters have referred to it. It is the division, the valley between two mountains where presumably Knockemstiff lies. And what I like about this story is it's sort of a man giving up. He starts off, he's just kind of hanging out in this girl's house, this girl named Sandy's house. She's taking care of her dad, who is just fucked up. He's basically paralyzed. He's got to change his diaper and shave him every day. And then every time, I think it was at 10 a.m., she gives him, or he has to give him a little shot of whiskey to just keep him going. And really not much happens in this story, but there's some interesting stuff that happens at the end of this that speak a little bit deeper into the human condition, I guess, and someone who is lost and who is essentially given up on life. And I think that's what makes this one special, even though I was hoping that maybe this was another character we had seen before, but it appears to be the first time we have met this gentleman. So I woke up thinking I'd pissed the bed again, but it was just a sticky spot from where Sandy and me fucked the night before. Again, Mr. Pollock, you continue to blow us away, literally, with the the first lines of these stories. And he continues to talk about Sandy. So I raised the blankets just a tad, traced my finger over the blue Knockemstiff Ohio tattoo that Sandy had etched in her skinny ass like a road sign. And again, this is where the depth starts beginning to happen, I believe, with the characterization here. Why some people need ink to remember where they come from will always be a mystery to me. So a guy who has no tattoos, I've always really wondered about the appeal of tattoos and because I'm into art and things like that, and my tastes change over time, and I just can never imagine something so permanent as a tattoo. It's something for the rest of my life having on my body. And he's kind of speaking to that here too. It's not so much that, but it's more along the lines of, why do you need to memorialize something like this? Why? I mean, you know exactly what it is. It's kind of like when someone dies and they put, in memory of a tattoo on their body, it's like you're never going to forget that. You don't need that on your body. And so it's one of those things where I wonder, I just wonder what the necessity is of that and why that appeals to some people. Maybe it's a way for them to cope. I don't know. But moving on, I was just getting ready to nail her again when Sandy's dad started up down the hall in his sick room, crying soft and sad like he'd been doing ever since his stroke. That pretty much drained the sap out of me. And so really that's what this guy's doing. He's kind of holing up in his girlfriend's house, and the way he's earning his keep essentially is taking care of her dad, who is very, very sick. And another great line when they're talking about it was just like my old man always claimed about my mother after she took off. If she had all of them sticking out her that's been sticking in her, she looked like a fucking porcupine. That was Sandy, all right. Damn near every boy in Twin Township had tapped her one time or another. And not until the second page or so, we learned this gentleman's name is Tom. And I was hoping that, or wondering anyway, if we had met a Tom before. Nothing rang a bell, and so I searched and did not find a Tom. So he appears to be the only Tom so far in this book. And we go through the excruciating detail of how this man, Tom, is helping Albert, Sandy's dad, changing his diaper, shaving him, giving him the alcohol. But then they decide to go buy cigarettes for her mom, and they go to Old Hap's Bar, which we know very well. It's been in a few stories. But looking across to the other side of the holler, I could just make out the frosted nose of the owl's car sticking out of the hillside across Hap's Bar. Probably the most interesting thing about the story. It was an abandoned 1966 Chrysler Newport, but people around here called it the Owl's Ride, the Owl's Castle, the Owl's this and that. Nothing was known about the car's original owner, but Porter Watson made sure nobody in the fucking county ever forgot the screech owl that had roosted in the front seat that summer after the car, plates missing and engine busted, mysteriously appeared parked halfway up the hill. We know Porter. We've seen him in a couple stories. He was one of those drug dealing kids in Lard, I believe, right? And then who was one of Bobby's buddies, which we haven't seen yet. I really hope we get to meet Bobby again. And then what happens? Well, Sandy, after Tom goes to the bathroom, right when he comes out, she is gone. She left with some trucker, and he's stuck there broke. Porter helps him out, buys him some beer, even buys him a pack of cigarettes so he doesn't have to come home empty-handed to Maud. But before all that, we get some more character wisdom from Mr. Pollock. And so I just sat there until closing time, drinking on Porter and listening to him go on and on about the Owl's car. When you first heard him talking about it, you'd figure he was batshit crazy, but really, he was just trying to latch on to something that would fill up his days so we didn't have to think about what a fucking mess he had made of everything. It's the same for most of us. Forgetting our lives might be the best we'll ever do. And this seems to be a constant theme in this entire collection of stories. All these people just kind of being miserable and failures at life. And even when they get those little successes, it seems that they just get destroyed at some part in this tale. And Porter continues after Tom asks him about what the history of it is. Is history? Porter snorted. Man, that car's like part of the landscape. It's like fucking nature. No, I said. I mean, like, how'd you figure it got there in the first place? It landed there. Landed? I looked over at him. His bloodshot eyes were locked on the wavy mirror behind the bar. You mean like, hell yes, he said. And we're damn lucky it did, he added, a sob starting to erupt from deep inside his throat, which is interesting. I didn't quite get that part, so let me know what you think in the comments about this and what kind of meaning that was, or what kind of meaning that had. But finally, Tom goes back, and I think I called her Maud earlier, but Mary is the name of the woman that they're bringing cigarettes to, or he is going to anyway. And so he brings a pack. She's watching The Love Boat at home, and she has this infatuation with buying books on travel, on certain places, on states and countries, and imagining herself like this fictional trip she goes on. And then another thing I forgot to say is that Sandy is always looking for the perfect man, and she will get on these go on these drug binges where she'll lock herself away in a room and do these drawings of the perfect man, the ideal man, who is very muscular with a tiny head apparently. And so I love that aspect here. Again, we have the mother and the daughter who are both trapped in these fictional fantasies, I guess. You know, Sandy is forever looking for the ideal man, and then her mother is just trying to get away, even if in her mind. And there's so much subtext in this story. So they're watching The Love Boat, and Mary's talking about the episode. Hawaii, Mary answered. I seen this one a dozen times. See that woman standing by the rail? The poor thing don't know her hubby's on the ship with his new girlfriend. And Mary dropped down into a recliner, lit a cigarette. The tip of the Marlboro began to glow like a stoplight in the middle of her wrinkled face. Is that them? I said. Two has-been movie stars were strolling on the deck, their arms wrapped around each other, their smiling faces pointed up at the sun. Yep, Mary said. The shit's gonna hit the fan pretty soon. And well, we know, right? That's a little bit of subtext of what's going to happen to poor Tom in a way, or at least it's reflecting sort of what he's thinking about in his life and what he's got himself into. And while he's thinking about what Sandy is up to with her logger friend, he remembers Albert, the man who he is taking care of. He's changing his diapers and so on. But he pulled a fifth of Rose from the refrigerator and walked down the hall to check on him. Though it was against Mary's rules, I figured he could do with a snort. A nightlight plugged into an outlet above him shone on his face like a pale blue star. Sitting down beside him, I uncapped the bottle. Hey, old man, I whispered. Let's have a drink. I stuck the straw down into the bottle before I realized that Albert was dead. It was probably the first time he'd ever turned down a drink in his life. So now we know that's the last thing that he is here for, right? This is kind of the final straw for him, literally. That straw in the mouth is the final straw for Tom, and he knows he's just got to get the hell out of here. And he pushes down Albert's eyelids, and he goes back to the living room and takes his coat and slips the bottle of wine in his pocket. And as he heads for the front door, he looked down and saw one of Sandy's drawings lying on the coffee table. She'd printed "Wanted" in bold letters over the man's shrunken head. And he takes it. He stuck it in the other pocket, then tiptoed over and gently pried the pack of cigarettes from Mary's hand, leaving her 3 in the ashtray. And he just takes off. It's freezing cold outside. It's been snowing. And where does he end up? He ends up at Owl's car. I pulled open the rusty door and crawled inside the Newport, flicked my lighter and looked around. And he sees all just these carcasses of animals and owl shit everywhere. And he finishes off Albert's bottle, and popping 2 of his Demerol, I stretched out the best I could across the front seat, closed my eyes, and sank deeper and deeper into that lonely world known only to those who sleep in abandoned vehicles. It's poetic beauty, man. That's what I'm saying here. It's just, there's some beautiful stuff in this. I think a lot of people read these stories and they're just disgusted, and they're sort of infatuated with all of the gore and the sex and the taboo and stuff. But man, this stuff is just rife with beauty as well. And he knows he's going to die here. He knows he's going to freeze to death, essentially, because, you know, as the car rattled past on the road below, I recalled the story about Sandy's uncle, Wimpy Miller, freezing to death in a dumpster behind the Sack and Save, his body buried in outdated lettuce. Then I thought of Hawaii, tried my best to conjure up the hot sand of a tropical beach, the warm, silky nights of paradise. The wind picked up, rocking the old car back and forth. Flakes of snow blew through the cracks and swirled above me. Reaching down, I picked up the tiny skull of a wretched little bird. I held it in my hand for a long time. It seemed as if everything I'd ever done in my life, the good and the bad, rested there. Then I slipped it, as thin and fragile as an egg, into my mouth. I'm not sure what to make of that last line. I feel like this whole last section is completely beautiful writing, and I was really transfixed by what he was doing here. It was this whole story is about a man who's given up. He doesn't have really anything. He's having sex with this girl who's essentially just looking for the ideal man. He's just kind of a waypoint here and there, just someone to take care of her dying dad. And now that her dad is dead, he's got nothing left to live for, nothing else to do. And so he just kind of, he's resigned to his fate, and he goes out into the cold, goes into Owl's car, and finishes off the drink, Albert's drink, and pops his drugs, and then puts this strange bird skull in his mouth. So I'm not sure what to make of that. So let me know in the comments what you got out of that. I mean, we do see here that he's talking about that everything I'd done in my life, the good and the bad, rested there. And so I don't know if he's just like burying himself with it, why he feels like he's consuming it. I'm not sure if having a skull or putting something in your mouth has some kind of cultural significance to the dead or the afterlife, but let me know if you know something I don't. But again, I really love the story. It's a very simple story. There's nothing too gratuitous about it, I guess. There's some great descriptions here. There's some depth to the character, to just contemplating life and death and all of the decisions you make. And I see, again, that is a recurring theme to this. There's plenty of stories like Discipline, for instance, where we have the guy who's pushing his kid so hard that he dies, and then he dies himself because he's trying to relive his glory days. But yeah, I can go on and on and on about this stuff. I love this, but let us end with I Start Over, the third and final story for this video. And wow, this one was a doozy. A couple of the guys on the Discord were, they'd already read it, and they were saying, wow, this really makes you want to take a shower. And I have to agree, this is probably Donald Ray Pollock at its very best here, I think. Don't get me wrong, I love all of the stories in this collection, but there's something visceral about this one, right? I mean, he really just does not pull any punches. The descriptions here are completely vivid, very, very vivid, and they really place you into the scene. And I'm just, again, constantly amazed at his ability to place you into this world, right? We're just reading words on a page, but it is more vivid than any film I've ever seen. So, but without further ado, let's talk about I Start Over. Everybody's seen it. The commercial where the old man is running along the moonlit beach with a beautiful pink-haired starlet clad in the silver thong. The one that says it's never too late to start over. This guy's bounding along like a fucking gazelle, his feet barely touching the sand, a bull's the size of a sledgehammer, knocking around inside his plaid swimsuit. And then this young girl. She can barely keep up, he's moving so fast. It's bullshit. Another lie they tease you with, hoping you'll fall for all the special effects. Dial the toll-free number with a credit card and clench between your false teeth. So we know this this tale is about a man who wants to start over, right? He's fed up with his life. He's fat. He's disgusting. His wife finds him disgusting, but he has some kind of virility to him, right? He wants to live. You know, his son even is. You know, his son fried his brain with drugs, and so he's essentially much like Dean in one of the last stories where he's just crazy. He's nuts. He's uncontrollable, and he's trapped in this. But you know, our protagonist here, he wants to move on. So Big Bernie Givens is his name, and let's talk about this next highlight here. Take me for example, Big Bernie Givens. I'm 56 years old and sloppy fat and stuck in Southern Ohio like the smile of a dead clown on a dead clown's ass. My wife shudders every time I mention the sex act. My grown son eats the dead stuff that collects on window sills. God damn, what a beautiful description. I must watch that damn commercial 20 times a day. I dream about it at night, about starting over. I wake up with that background music knocking holes in my heart. Like I said, it's bullshit. And so we begin the story with an idealized life. He's envisioning himself chasing after this woman, but knowing that this commercial is bullshit. And we describe, or he describes himself here, as Big Bernie Givens, and he's a pretty disgusting fellow. And then we cut to a scene where he and his family are inching forward in the drive-thru at the Fetter's Dairy Queen. But it's been the worst summer on record, just one massive heat stroke. My new white shirt is already stained the color of pus. My shades are fogged over with greasy vapors. Fumes from the paper mill stack across town make the whole county smell like a giant fart. The sun is everywhere. I love that too, because this final line is just so simple. The sun is everywhere, and it's one of those things where less is so much more powerful here, because you could say something like, the sun beat down over all of the county, or the sun beat down over. You could be really descriptive with it, but something about the simplicity of this is so much more powerful. The sun is everywhere. We can just imagine that. We can feel it. But before we get there, the first thing he asks is, what are those things where they burn your dead body? And so I think that's setting the stage exactly for where we're going in this story. And crematorium? She yawns. She rubs her eyes, runs a freckled hand through her thin brown hair, dead as straw now from too many dye jobs. No, not that. Like over in Asia, I say, wiping the sweat from my forehead. And we get a little bit more of his son, Jerry, who eats dead things off windsills. So I watch Jerry struggling against the plastic webbing we use to hold him down and keep him from jumping out into traffic. Blue veins, thick as fingers, bulge in his scarlet neck. The poor bastard never lets up. And we get a little bit deeper into Big Bernie's head here when we get an image of him a little bit ago trying to pick up this young girl. Her voice sounded like tinfoil. Pictures of butterflies covered her pink shirt. She had the body of a woman but the face of a little kid. Cow hormones have the young people all fucked up. I could smell my sweat, taste the bologna sandwiches I'd had for lunch. Great descriptions here again and again and again. And so he's considering picking her up, this young girl, presumably underage. He says she looks like a girl, and then even though she has a body of a woman, but her volleyball coach, I believe, that's my volleyball coach. She stepped away from the car just as the woman leaped off the porch and began running toward us. I blew the two red lights then made a fast ride out of town. And we get more glimpses into this man's life when this afternoon we've been out to my mother-in-law's for another one of her Sunday dinners, a raw pink chicken stuffed with bits of bluegrass that I swear the old bag forged from an Easter basket. And now my ulcers are screaming for long dogs with sauce and limp, greasy fries. So they are going to the Dairy Queen. And here's another great bit of Donald Ray Pollock wisdom here. Besides, I'm beginning to believe that anything I do to extend my life is just going to be outweighed by the agony of living it. Just like the last story, just like many of these stories, these characters are done, right? They're at their breaking point, or they've just completely given up on life, regardless of where they are. If they have nothing at all, or if they're like this man and he still has a family, but it's kind of in tatters again. And he's even fantasizing, dying here, about this lighter. Fire when ready, I say, standing at attention, flipping her a little salute. Fantasizing myself as a brave orange fireball is damn near the only thing that makes me hard anymore. But today, for some reason, I crank it up a notch. The flames in my mind leap across to Jill's hair, then onto the house, and finally to Jerry. Whoosh! In less time than it takes Larry Fetter to burn a burger, the only thing left of the fucked up family that lived at 124 Belmont is ashes. So he's fantasizing about just destroying everything, not only himself, but his entire family, because at least his son anyway is in bad shape. His wife, not so much as far as I can tell. But here, as they're ordering food at the Dairy Queen, his wife gives him a little bit of sobering reality when she says, yeah, she says, I mean, the way I see it, Big is like Arnold guy in the movies, but Fat is like your Aunt Gloria. So I've always wondered why they call you Big Bernie and not Fat Bernie. And so again, that's a literal or figurative, anyway, punch to the gut of poor Bernie. And so he then tears off 3 of the crumbly Rollades and chomps them while staring at the little amplified speaker protruding between the giant photos of the chocolate rock and the dilly bars. Even if I ate everything on the menu, I'd still be hungry. I mean, this is manifesting again. This is more subtext that this guy, he just needs more out of life. He's desperate. He's desperate to feel, and that those 2 lines, or that one line anyway, speaks exactly to that point. Because in fact, he looks like a rabid dog in that horror movie that Jerry made us play over and over last winter until Jill finally rigged it to look like it broke the VCR. I'd bet that movie is Cujo, if I had to guess. And next we get a little piece of information about how unfortunately he feels about his son. So I think back to when Jerry was that age. It makes me feel like shit thinking about it. But there are days when I'd give anything to just be able to prop him out on the curb like a broken impalance for the junk man to haul away. And he notices a girl who works here, and she's chewing purple gum, and the way she blows bubbles reminds me of Jill back when we were young and horny, before we lost the map that takes you to places like that. Hey, I say, turning to Jill, that girl's a spitting image of you back when you car hopped at the Sunburger. Remember that? But it's one of those memories that makes the present only that much more unbearable. And Jill just shakes her head, sinks lower into the seat. And so we're constantly building up to this inevitable explosion. We know what's going to happen. Just beat by beat, element by element, it grows and grows and grows. And that's what I love about the story. Despite, I mean, there's so many things to love about the story, but I love this sense of a ticking time bomb. And we get exactly what we want. Because on one hand, we think it's not going to go there, and then it does go there. And while we wait for the order, I listen to my son try to swallow his tongue and go over the whole fucking mess for the 1,000th time. 2 years ago, on the night before Jerry was supposed to board the bus for boot camp, he went to a party out in the sticks and never came home. 3 days later, someone threw him out in the car just the hospital in Portsmouth, 50 miles away. We were sitting in the day room of the wing where Jerry was transferred after he came out of the coma. The young doctor on duty walked in and stuck a video on the TV. And it's the old your brain on drugs with the egg frying in the pan. And this is where we learn of Jerry's fate. I wasn't sure if he was born that way or if something happened, and clearly now we know that he fried his brains on drugs, and that is why he is the way he is. And more great lines here to demonstrate the distance that some of these characters have. This one's with his wife, Jill. Look, they've got the same microwave we've got. Jill said that day at the hospital, her voice skipping like one of her old Wayne Newton records. She was trying to pick pork and beans out of Jerry's hair while he made another attempt to walk through the wall. And we get to meet Delbert, I believe, again. Remember there was a Delbert character way back in the Fish Sticks story. Presumably this is farther into the future, if that is the same Delbert. I can't remember, and I should have looked if that was the last name. So if you already did look back and know this is the same guy, then let me know in the comments. And this is when we meet the car full of kids. They all look like the same model, matching earrings, shaved heads, Little goatees sprouted around their mouths like hair around a poodle's ass. And this girl, she immediately responds to the boys when in the rear view, I see one of the boys say something that makes the girl laugh. Then I watch in disbelief as she raises her shirt to show her tits. Holy shit, I say, stopping the car. Jerry, damn boy, turn around and check that out. For a moment, the girl's breasts are framed in the window like some advertisement for a new double scoop sundae. Just, again, amazing visual descriptions here. But I'd give anything just to feel the way she feels right now. It's the kind of feeling that people never realize they've had until years later, when it's no longer possible to feel it. More Mr. Pollock wisdom. But these guys, they are making fun of his son, and he's fed up with it. But this, again, I highlighted this because this is interesting. This is when you're kind of pissed off at somebody and you step out and you kind of decide to do something, right? And then you're kind of frozen. So I set the emergency brake and haul my fat ass out of the car. I stand there for a second, pulling my shirt down over my white belly, wondering what I'm supposed to do now. And so he's already committed, right? Because he's been fantasizing about this in his head, or maybe he's just acting on impulse. But once he gets there, once he stands up, once he's out, he doesn't know what to do. And this is really when I thought he was going to back down and just kind of fold, right? Because he's kind of relegated himself to this terrible life, or at least what he deems a terrible life. And they make fun of him. Hey, Porky, oink, oink. But he's pissed. He goes over to his car. He starts kicking it. But then he knocks him down. He knocks one of these kids down with a single punch. I've never hit anyone that hard in my life, not even Delbert Anderson. Suddenly, the world lights up as if someone peeled the skin off my eyeballs. I look up at the sky, startled by the giant bloom of blue. But fuck, it's only my sunglasses. I'm so pumped that it takes me a second to realize they've fallen off my face. I love that too because, you know, he's pumped up. He's energized for what's going to happen. And you know, when I'm writing or when a lot of writers write, they kind of, you know, they exaggerate. It's hyperbole about how someone's feeling. Specifically this part when he's startled by the giant bloom of blue, the sky opening up. But it's literally opening up but fuck, it's only my sunglasses. I like that because it snaps you right back to reality. It's no longer this kind of grand image of something that's only going on in his head. It's actually because his sunglasses fell off. And this is a really, really sad line here, but I love it because he turns around and he looks at his son and who's making these duck sounds. Even after all this time, he's got that angel dust glaze in his eyes, as if torching his brain is the only thing he'll ever remember. And, you know, you really think about that because you wonder, like, is he perpetually locked in that moment when he fried his brain at that party? And that's what's so great about these lines is that they're really just conveying the feelings of this man and how he's conflicted, right? He still loves his son very dearly. And there's another point, actually the next highlight here, which really demonstrates that. So I fumble around, then pull a napkin from one of the sacks of food and wipe his face. When my hand brushes against his jaw, his eyes close like a puppy's. Beautiful line. It really conveys how he feels about his son and maybe just, you know, that he doesn't completely blame him, right? He knows that he brought this on himself, but he sees him as innocent in a way. But anyway, he takes off. He's out of here after he beats the shit out of this kid. And his wife, slow down, Jill screams. What the hell's wrong with you? I slide the zipper from my pocket and squeeze a small metal case, rub it between my fat, sweaty fingers. It has 2 dates engraved on it. We know this was given to him as a retirement gift, but it is like a tombstone. I love that aspect because it commemorates when he started his job, when he ended his job, but saying it's like a tombstone is, again, more subtext, more foreshadowing of essentially what's to come. But finally, he's feeling it. He's feeling energized. Suddenly, happiness rips through me like a sword. Reaching over, I grab Jill's knobby knee, but she shoves my hand away. Cack, cack, Jerry squawks as he bounces forward against his restraints. I dig a hot dog out of the sack and tear the wrapper off, cram it in my mouth. In the rear view, I see a police car coming up fast behind us, all of its lights throbbing. The trees, the signs, the entire world start to bend backward as we race up the highway. Cack, cack, Jerry goes again, and I almost grip my teeth. But then, ramming the gear shift in the fourth, I start over. I love the story. I know a lot of you guys were saying you needed a hot shower or a cold shower after this, but despite how much disgusting description is in here, it's really about a man who's frustrated with his life. He wants to feel the fire of life again. He wants to live again the most powerful way possible, and he's dreaming about all these things, about this infomercial, about all these young girls he can't have. He even goes to the lengths of trying to pick them up. So he's a very desperate guy, and finally he snaps. Finally he just unleashes upon the world, beats his kid up. He knows he's going to jail. He knows he's in big trouble, but he embraces it, right? He grabs his wife's knee like he loves her, like he finds her attractive again, and he's almost upset by the sounds of his son's cat-cacking. But then ramming the gear shift and forth, I start over. And so again, just amazing stuff. I completely love the story. I know I say that a lot, but it's true. And I just really wonder what is going to come next, because what do we got coming up next? Well, we have the final 3 stories here. We are up until the end, everybody. So blessed or blessed, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Honolulu and the fights. I'm very excited to see exactly where we end with this collection of amazing, amazing stories. I've completely enjoyed it thoroughly. I don't think there's ever been a dull moment for me in this entire thing. Sure, there's been some ebbs and flows, but I think you need that, right? You don't want to have things like this story just hitting you hard every moment, just like the first story. You got to have the things that slow down. You got to have the contemplative moments, and that's what makes Donald Ray Pollock such an amazing storyteller. So I hope you're enjoying it. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the Discord. What are you thinking? And we're going to finish this up next week, everybody. So stay tuned for the final episode of Knockemstiff. It's definitely a bittersweet thing. I'm sad to leave this collection behind. Part of me wishes it would just never end, because I always enjoy picking up this book and reading it. And I hope you are too. So I will see you next week with the dramatic conclusion we shall see of Donald Ray Pollock's Knockemstiff. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for reading along with me. And I will see you then. Bye.